It's my pleasure to invite Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller to share her message on humanity's journey with justice, equity, and compassion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to use the step.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'll put the step down for you.
I got it.
Yeah, I like being able to see all of you. All right, and is that a good place for the mic?
Yep.
Yay, I love it. I know it seems like a very long time ago, but would you believe last Saturday, a week ago, was 4th of July? Wow, crammed a lot into the last week, most of us did. Amazing. And in a couple of days, it's going to be Bastille Day. Yeah. So this was the beginning of the breakaway from the belief that only certain people had the right to think for themselves. These two experiences in the North American continent and in the country of France. Now, the principles were emerging for a long time before that, but the structures were still hanging on to the past. That sounds somewhat familiar. And the structures were what needed to be shifted in order for everyone to hear the song and say the word. Yes? Yeah. So in this period of the 1700s into the early 1800s, between 1775 or 76 and 1848 or 1850, choose your dates, virtually every English-speaking, French-speaking, Latin-based language-speaking, Roman-based language-speaking country went from a divine right monarchy to a constitutional-based something. Some kind of republic. It might be a constitutional monarchy, or it might be the parliamentary system, or it might be the weird thing we created here. Took about 75 years, that's what it takes, for the Western culture that was industrializing to shift the institutions and structures away from only one person in the whole place gets to think for themselves to everyone does. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And that was the beginning of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to turn on the slide projector. Believe it or not, we're going to have slides.
Perhaps.
Yeah, it just takes a minute to warm up. I had turned it off because I didn't want you to be bothered by it while you were doing other things. Yeah, it's on. Yeah. So when the Unitarians and the Universalists, it's coming up. It's just doing its warm-up thing. Hang in there. When the Unitarians and the Universalists got together in 1965, they said, wow, we don't have a belief system. We need some kind of something. And for whatever reason, it chose to show you the wrong screen. So let's do the right screen. There we go. And what they came up with were a set of 7 principles. Yeah, is that okay for you guys? Because we can turn this one off and you can have light. Your choice.
Yeah, it's right there.
That's okay. So they came up with 7 principles. There was an 8th one added later. And these principles, actually they came up with 6 and they added the 7th. And instead of adding the 8th, they changed the whole thing to the values. And the values are on the picture over there. So, but what I'm looking at are the principles because they are the foundation of this marvelous organization we call the Unitarian Universalists. And in these sets of principles, they really, really struggled. It was the period, we're looking at 1965 to 1967. So the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam era, it wasn't a war, it was an era. And all those things were very much in people's awareness. And they wanted to make sure that this group of people who were committed to thinking for themselves, carrying that idea forward, were able to coalesce around ideas that they could think for themselves about. So the first principle I went over a while back, and the third principle I went over a while back, but this one is the second. Let's do this together. We covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in all our human relations. And as we sang the song, the 123 that we sing all the time, it says, stir in our hearts the compassion and move in our hands the justice. You cannot separate them. They are equally interactive in all parts of beingness. Now, in the current form, under the values, justice is one of the values, and it says, we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our communities, and our nation. It's a little different from the justice that other folks have suggested. And in fact, the Hebrew term that we have taken to address the offering, to describe the offering that we give, or something that we share with someone who is begging, is more accurately translated not as charity, but as justice. We give our surplus, says one UU minister, not out of fear of divine punishment, nor for a transaction of prosperity. We give what we can when we can, because when we do so, we build a more just world. So in the UUA, we need to realize that this concept of justice is two pieces. One is the idea that there is some kind of system of law and balance and all of that, and that it needs to be put into place, and we need to follow it, and we need to make sure that it is fair for all. And the other one is this idea that by sharing what we can, we are building a more just world. And that's where the compassion comes in, yes? Yeah. So justice, equity, and compassion are the essence of the second principle. And if we think about what happened in that 75-year period at the beginning of the 19th century, what we're seeing is the emergence of compassion in human relations, as well as the shift from only one person gets to think. Now, those of you who have been monitoring what's going on in the Islamic states are aware that compassion is not a big thing there. And that was typical in the medieval period when their rules and their practices were being put into place. Now, we remember that Islam began in 600 under a very compassionate teaching by the Prophet, blessed be his name, Muhammad. However, as it evolved, it was tied more and more into previously existing cultural norms of the Arab peoples, who at that time were just beginning to realize the Roman Empire wasn't running their lives anymore. And they were in a world where there were Christians and Jews and other kinds of people, and the Arab people, when Muhammad began, there were over 300 gods and goddesses in the Kaaba. That is now what they walk around several times at the Hajj. Wow. So that compassion and that understanding and that sheer glory in human relations, that was what Muhammad was experiencing in his visions and in his downloads, in his channeling actually, but we won't go there. Got lost in the trying to find a way in a world where people were doing things differently. So by the 12th century, the current assumptions and norms of the Islamic people became the only way, except there were 6 different branches and they all implemented it in different ways, which is why we see all the infighting anymore, just the way Protestants and Catholics have fought so much. So that way of being has almost no compassion. If you're not my child and you're not behaving properly, I have no compassion for you. I will kill you without a thought, because it's what the rules say. Wow. The thing that was brought into being in the European period immediately prior to all of these revolutions and changes in government was what we call the Enlightenment period, which was built on the Renaissance, which was built as a result of the Black Death killing and the previous killing off by the Inquisition of all the healers. Yeah. So the compassionate healers had been killed by the Inquisition that was operating on the same mindset as the Islamic State. Yeah. Your body doesn't matter. I have no compassion for if you are breaking the rules as I understand them. Ow. And all too often when we say the word justice, that may be the mindset that comes. Oh dear. And we are seeing some of that in the leadership of this country today, unfortunately. Sigh. Justice without compassion is not building a just world, is it? So there's a book called The Behavioral Code. And as the description on the internet says, and this is a book that's available at the UUA resources. If you go to uua.org and you say any of the words that you can think of that we talk about, in a search, there's a whole list of resources. They're keywords, and each one of them has as many as 300 or 400 books and pamphlets and other things that you can look at. And this is one of them, The Behavioral Code. Quote, offers a necessary and different approach to battling crime and injustice that is based in understanding the science of human misconduct, rather than relying on our instinctual drive, which is not true, our culturally trained drive to punish as a way to shape behavior. Okay? Most of us had to learn as parents how to redirect rather than automatically punish when we saw something that happened the right way, because we were taught that punishment is the way to do it. Right? Learning to redirect is an important thing. So this one says that the book catalyzes the conversation about how the law can effectively improve human conduct. Move to a more just world, right? And respond to some of our most pressing issues today, from police misconduct to corporate malfeasance. And my favorite example out of the 10 or 12 examples in this book are walls in Germany that pee back on people who pee on them. There are examples equivalent to that all through the book of, what is clear doing? Do you understand the consequences of what it's doing? Well, here's the consequences, and here's a way to guide people to behave differently. And that's what this book is about, the behavioral code. Guide people to behave differently rather than enforce the law, right? Big difference. So that compassion emerged, believe it or not, through the intellectual experiences that we call the Enlightenment in Europe. The logical working out of what will happen if, what are the consequences of an action. And that logical process, that logical unfolding led to, oh my goodness, if we don't start with compassion, we'll end up with a real mess. And so the gentleman who put together the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution a few years later were very much embedded in that way of thinking. They were products of the European Enlightenment. Barbara Tuchman, a marvelous historian, 2 Pulitzer Prizes for histories. She calls the group who formed the Declaration of Independence and Constitution the brightest, most highly educated group of 50 men anywhere at any time in human history. There's 2 spots right there in the middle. Thank you. Anytime. And they were all homeschooled, by the way. 1 or 2 of them had gone on to other schools, but they're lawyers. And the lawyers learned to be lawyers by apprenticeship. They didn't go to law school. And the plantation folks grew up on their plantation and learned on the plantation and so on. There were clear differences of opinions and understandings, as happened when Jefferson was required to eliminate his line that said slavery would be abolished in the Declaration of Independence in order to get a unanimous vote for it. South Carolina was quite determined on that subject, and as one of the lines says, and the South stands with South Carolina. Yeah. So if you haven't seen the movie 1776 musical, you gotta see it. It's almost entirely accurate. All right. So this idea that justice and compassion and the ability to think for ourselves are totally wound up together is fundamental to this nation and to the UUAs. One of the things that our current UUA president said at the GA in June, we have long understood ourselves to be bearers of love and justice to the world. Those who show up for peace and freedom, who side with love in the face of all that would otherwise diminish our humanity. A love that expects nothing less of us than the rebuilding of this struggling world. Can you imagine a world that isn't doing what this world seems to be doing right now? Please do. I've called you to do it many times. Please do it more. The more we imagine it, the more we will act in alignment with it. The more we act in alignment with it, the more it is going to be visible to us. She says, sometimes what we know of love and justice pushes us in ways we never expected. And sometimes the need to bear such love into the world is heartbreakingly large. It is in those moments that we most need one another and most need beloved community. And that's why we come together on Sunday mornings and the occasional potlucks and any study groups or small groups we can be in. Because that's how we get through those heartbreakingly large moments when the call to love does not seem possible to me. But it is possible, and together we're capable of doing it. I love this. Equity. We covenant, and this is one of our values, we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Fully accessible and inclusive. That's not just physical. That's not just gender, race, and sexual orientation and all that stuff. That's honoring the heart and soul of every being and making that heart and soul accessible to each of us and all of us. This is what beloved community looks like. So it's not just that we make sure all the things are in place so that it's possible for everyone to participate in an enjoyable way. It's also that our hearts are sufficiently open to accept and honor the hearts and souls of everyone who shows up. When we think about equity, in the 2024 UU World Magazine, it says, in naming equity as a core value, we come full circle. In our theological heritage, Universalists, Unitarians, and Unitarian Universalists understand every person to be held in love in an interdependent web of existence. We understand every person to possess, are you ready for this? A spark of the divine in a cosmos where all life is sacred. This is a powerful piece. It goes way beyond our cultural norms. It goes way beyond our humanistic tendencies. And it calls us to recognize that whatever it is that is orderly and present throughout all that is available and alive in every being, and we get to see that and know that. This is equity. This is saying we're all the same stuff. And we show up in different ways. And I appreciate, Helen, that you were willing to stand up and say that in the group. Thank you. We show up in very different ways sometimes. I'm working in another congregation with a man who has to duck through every doorway. Yeah. Wow. That's a very different way from me, who's vertically challenged and has to stand on the step. We hug, and I'm at his button above his belt. And equity means we're the same stuff, and that heart space is something we share. And that soul space is accessible and needs to be accessible every moment. This is beloved community. And this is needed for when the need to be loving in the world is heartbreakingly overwhelming. But it's also fun. And that's the other piece that we sometimes forget when we look at our values and our principles, that human beings are designed for fun and enjoyment. And where we find fun and joy is usually where our heart is calling us to be. So when beloved community can be joyful for everyone present, that's equity. And again, we're all going to find that a little bit differently. I love that fog continues to exist. It's in its 10th year. Not everyone's going to want to go out hiking, but thank you so much for continuing to do that, enjoying it. And if you like to hike, find the fog group. I think it's 10 o'clock Wednesdays here. Yes. Yes. Every time that I have to be somewhere else and I drive past here and I see the cars, I go, yes. That's wonderful. And when we do the music and the dancing, you know, thank you so much for creating the cafes, my dear. Yes, so much joy. This is part of how we support each other in loving ourselves and each other. Yes?
Yes.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so we understand this world. This is also in that UU World magazine. Among these people to be the locus of religious life, we understand there is a mandate emerging from our theological heritage to dismantle the structures and systems which silence, harm, and exploit human beings and the varied ecosystems of our planet, as well as to work to create just and sustainable communities without barriers to belonging in our communities. We understand that it is ours to do, to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain. Yes. So as we understand that this community is how we're creating a world that works, a just and compassionate and equitable world, we can take joy in that understanding, and then we can allow joy in our interactions that help us connect with heart and soul. And it's that connection that does the work. Every time we are being connected, the world is transformed. Every time we are feeling the love, the world is enhanced, and everyone gets to feel it. Yes? Thank you. And that gets us to the next piece, this thing called compassion. Now, the UUA provided the tan picture there, and I think that's one aspect, and then I stuck in the other one because this is what we do in the world, in our community. This is something we do on a monthly basis as part of our compassion. There is a book called Worth Fighting For, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending, when cruelty is trending. He says, the description says that John, his name is Pavlovitz, has inspired millions to keep boldly loving both neighbors and strangers, and continues to be a voice of sanity and urgency when so much is still at stake. This is a very modern book. In another one, Injustice in the Care of Souls, there's a chapter, a section called The Pastoral Caregiver. This is a very interesting book, The Care of Souls, because it's a set of articles by various UUs around the world. And this one article is called Midwives and Holy Subversives. I just would love that as a bumper sticker, right? All right. So she writes another article, The Politics of Tears, Lamentation as Justice Making. Ow. But when we come up and we do our joys and concerns, we're actually contributing to a just world. Can you see that? Yeah. As we share our souls and we share our griefs and we share what we're enjoying, we are saying we are a beloved community and this world can be the peace we have been seeking. It's just one more step in that way. But my favorite thing when I'm looking at compassion is Karen Armstrong's book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. It's a nice reference book to have on the shelf. I don't think we have it in the library anymore. But she begins with the chapter, Learn About Compassion. And we need to play with that word. Some of you know I've had a little bit of trouble with it because when I was growing up, this first picture was the only form of compassion we were allowed. You know, get in there and really feel with someone who was in their tears and maybe be a little pitiful for them, you know, feel some pity and whatever. No. The word calm means with, and the word passion means feeling, deep feeling. Can I feel with you as we move ahead? One of the things I love about this visit that you all described, the Peruvians here, is it was really compassionate in the sense that you were sharing the feelings of living here with these folks, and they were sharing their feelings about being in this crazy place we call the U.S. and this really weird place we call the left coast. She encourages us to look at compassion not only as that way of being with and feeling with, but also as compassion for ourselves. How can we be compassionate when, oh dear, I blew it. Whoops, I forgot that one. Oh, I am so sorry I let that one go. Nobody here's ever done any of that. All right, she provides us concrete methods to allow ourselves to be compassionate with ourselves, for ourselves. And what's really cool is when we are compassionate with ourselves, guess what we're more effective at with people around us? right? The self-critical person is the most likely to be critical of others. Whenever someone starts raging about how someone's behaving, I wonder what their internal life is like. Right? And so Karen reminds us that becoming a compassionate human being is a lifelong project and a journey filled with rewards. I'm going to give you a couple more quotes. In the UU World last December, Kala Childers wrote, "When faced with imperfection, self-criticism, or doubts, we can allow ourselves grace." Grace. Grace is a marvelous word. It's the root for gratitude and grateful. It's also that marvelous thing that Martha the dancer does, right? Grace. Can I move with grace? Can I think and speak with grace? Can I offer grace to myself and others? Grace, that which all of us can feel, that deep gratitude. Gracias, grace. All right, so we can try to breathe in the love that surrounds us. We're in beloved community. Even if we don't buy into the idea that some people in this theology accept that the infinite, all that is, the quantum field, is actually a field of love. If you can't get that far, at least you can get into the people around me. My community is a community of love. And I can breathe that in. But if I can't allow myself to think that maybe love is one of the underlying qualities of the all that is, when I was in grad school, we used to play with, well, is gravity love? Is magnetism love? Right? Maybe that is a fundamental quality of the nature of all that is. The quantum field has bosons, tendencies to come together, as well as fermions, tendencies to split apart. But the splitting apart is fun because as soon as you split apart, you find others in the bosons come in and you're back together in some other new form. So the underlying issue, when we look at these three ideas and when we covenant to promote and affirm them, is are we going to go out and fight against something? Or are we going to go in and discover what is ours to create? And ultimately, whichever approach we're taking, ultimately our goal is to bring about, to help create, to make possible a humanity's experience, an experience for all humanity, where justice, equity, and compassion are our norm, are our fundamental thought process, are the basic behavior with which we address whatever comes up for us. The final line is a quote: "Why science fiction is an act of faith." The article is "The Brilliance of Star Wars." It's an act of faith to imagine a world where oppression is either gone or, as in the case of Star Wars, oppression is ultimately defeated. Imagine the world where everyone is assumed to have the right and ability to think for ourselves, where every soul is accepted and appreciated, where feeling with each other is normal, not weird. And where everyone knows that every situation is a sharing of what we have and building a world of peace, of joy, and fulfillment for all. Thank you very much.